All right, we'd just like to thank everybody for coming back and joining us, or if you're just getting here now, thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce Lee Hamelin and his brother Carrie. Lee Hamelin is a local author, and he's here today to talk about his upbringing and the book that he's wrote. So I will just read a little about the author. Like thousands of other Canadian Aboriginal children from the 1950s to the 1980s, Lee Hamelin was forcefully removed from his home during what became known as the 60s scoop. Rather than succumb to trauma and despair, however, Lee thrived in his new home, aided in no small part by his loving foster parents. Lee eventually followed in his foster father's footsteps, becoming a mechanic and operating his own automotive repair business. While he and his wife Paulette have suffered their own personal traumas, including the loss of 2 children, they have managed to maintain a positive outlook on life, aided in no small part by their strong Christian faith. Lee and Paulette live in Stettler, Alberta. In his spare time, Lee enjoys golfing, biking, reading, church activities, and this is his first book. So I would like to introduce Lee and his brother Carrie, and after he's done talking, we'll have a moment for questions and answers. Lee's book is also here to purchase from Lee, and he's willing to autograph it, I hear, so I will hand it over.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is, I spoke last year, by the way, and so it wasn't such a, well, today is not such a big icebreaker, but I'm still nervous, okay? So I'll have to put up with me. I have to write everything out, and I have to read everything, or else I'll get sidetracked, and I'll go down a garden path that I may not come back to, so I have to read what I write. When I look at my brother's writing, it's all over the place, and I haven't got a clue
I got maps on here.
what he's going to talk about. So anyway, I'll begin. So Tanse, it means hi, great. I would like to give a warm welcome to all and to thank you for coming here today. To begin with, I want to give thanks to the Creator for creating us, for sustaining us, and giving us wisdom to live our lives. Now, a heartfelt thank you to the team that took responsibility for organizing a busy and productive day. Thank you to Felicity. We can clap. Loretta. Deanna. And Stephanie. Thank you to the County of Stettler and Jen at the library for the use of this room. And thank you to the town of Stettler, specifically for raising the orange flag. That to me is a demonstration of an act of reconciliation. If I have missed any person, forgive me, or any people. When asked if I would be interested in speaking about a special topic on this special day, I pondered once again the significance of this event. To share an important element of my life that really affects all of us had me conclude this is my duty. Very significant for me is that my brother is here today to also share. To share the story that has followed me and my brother most of our lives and will continue to be told once we are gone from this earth. You see, part of the Indigenous culture is to share and pass down stories to help the next generation. To help heal the wounds, whether the stories are happy stories or sad stories. This presentation is on a topic that all Canadians need to talk about. We need to talk about reconciling with the past injustices that were done to the Indigenous peoples. Reconciling the trauma inflicted on the Indigenous peoples. Reconciling the differences we all share. These events are proven facts, not fiction. There are detractors in this country who are willing to deny that some of these events even happened or have been exaggerated to somehow justify that these policies were for the best interests of the First Nations people. Best interest for whom? A new coined phrase is now emerging. Commentators have suggested or make the excuse that some people are in unconscious denial. It does not matter what definition is used. Detractors will be detractors. This is not a blame game, but a coming together for many cultures to coexist in peace and understanding. Combined with truth, it is the only way we as a country can come to understand the dark past and hopefully change our ways of working together for the betterment of all of us. The last time I spoke here, I shared a disclaimer in reference to the book I was writing, which at that time was in my publisher's hands. The book is now in my hands and being distributed worldwide, even as I speak. Even through this difficult path of writing my life story, this for me I consider a great accomplishment. Because writing about my past and the events that shaped my future forced me to reconcile with hard feelings, with distrust, with wasted time and events that were not in my control. Beyond my control, the title of the book I wrote best puts into context these events that happened to me. Just as past events that happened to thousands of Indigenous people for hundreds of years was in fact beyond their control. My ancestors lost control of their way of life, which included how they worshipped, the clothes they wore, the language they spoke, the food they ate, and the land that sustained them. These are the truths that many Canadian people are not aware of. Obtaining some feedback from friends that have read my book, there seem to be two commentaries that stood out. One is that the readers didn't know these events even happened. And two, the readers were, I think, genuinely upset and sad upon learning of these revelations. This for me is an indication how uneducated the people of Turtle Island are regarding the First Nations people's struggle with colonization. Now, if you don't know where Turtle Island is, you're sitting on it. It's a turtle holding the land up. It's actually North America, okay? So we're on Turtle Island. I don't fault most people for their ignorance about the history of Indigenous people. When I was in grade school, I learned very little regarding the history of the First Nations people, the natives, as was told to me. Of course, it may have been that I was not paying attention, just fooling around, like flying paper airplanes or shooting spitballs at my classmates, which I did a lot of, by the way. I don't know if you remember, but when I was in school, if we got the teacher really mad, he would pick up the chalk brush and throw it at you. Well, I managed to always miss, and the guy in the back got it most of the time. But I'm probably not far off in my assumption. Most Canadians know very little about the Indigenous way of life. Some of this is due to location. Where there is a heavy presence of natives, it seems the general population highlights only the drunk Indians or the lazy bums. The people's fears are the possibility of getting robbed. Where there are few natives, stereotyping takes center stage. So for many people, this is all they have come to know about First Nation people. Admittingly, some natives are not helping our cause. This is not the true Indigenous way of life. The truth is now being reported more and more as to how land treaties were broken. An example of this was the deal made between the Crown and Treaty Number 4. In 1874, some First Nations people agreed to allow the Crown the use of approximately 195,000 square kilometers of land spanning southeast Alberta through Saskatchewan and west central Manitoba. Well, not very far from here. The First Nation people held up their end of the bargain, but the Crown did not reciprocate. In the agreement, there was to be a $5 annuity payment to all First Nation members paid every year. Back then, this was a significant amount to be used to purchase goods and equipment. 150 years later, the $5 annuity is still being paid, with no increase to reflect inflation. And land that is now not theirs. I consider that a slap in the face. A court battle is now before the courts worth billions of dollars. Other treaties with similar arrangements are also before the courts. This is but one way how promises were never kept. Also, how education became an assimilation policy. Hence, the residential school trauma for many First Nations people, of which my mom was part of. Or how government policies were designed to extract resources and land to be given to companies that had political connections. This we know, and the rest of the country is now learning the disastrous effect it has had on the First Nations people. When Murray Sinclair laid down the 94 calls for action through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015, only 12 have come to pass to date. That's a long ways away from 94. As real and true as this is, the tide is turning slowly, but it is turning. More and more Indigenous youths are attending post-secondary schooling. More and more youths are attending university level training. This is to me where the tide is turning. The future looks good and promising. Heck, Wab Kinew, the Anishinaabe chief, is now the Premier of Manitoba. A voice at the table of government that hopefully will help set a bright future for the Indigenous population living there. We can't just put our trust in other people and expect them to do the work we can do. We must also trust ourselves and work hard to build a relationship with our countrymen. On a more personal note, reconciliation hits close to home. Just as this country needs to come to terms with past failures regarding their citizens, family members also need to come to terms with their relationships. As generational trauma manifests itself and is passed down, the work of building good relationships with family members is very difficult. In my book, I stated the news of family members passing on. This is ongoing. This past summer, another brother of mine died. A rather sad commentary on my behalf, because there was time for me to reconcile with him before he left. It never happened. So I would urge anyone here to start that reconciliation process with distant family members that have been separated for whatever reason. Healing needs to start at home, then with our neighbors. Great things can happen, and great things will happen. Now, I didn't really talk a lot about my book, and I don't want to, because I want you to buy it. Okay? Because if I tell everything that's in my book, that it's of no value. You have to read it and absorb it yourself, okay? But you can ask me questions later, because we're going to have a question and answer period. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll pass it on to my brother now.